I knew this guy once who was taking 20,000 milligrams per week of testosterone. Sounds insane, but he was doing it. You want to know the story? Stay tuned. I created Species Nutrition with one mission in mind: to provide bodybuilders and serious athletes with no-nonsense supplements that work. I put my name and reputation on every bottle of Species Nutrition products. If you want to be your absolute best, join the evolution.
RX Television, RxMuscle.com. This is Ask Dave, your weekly 30-minute question and answer show with Dave Palumbo. Whatever is on your mind, bodybuilding, non-bodybuilding, be it diet, training, supplementation. Of course, this week is the first ever Pittsburgh Pro with an open class competition. So really, truly one of the most exciting contests of the year, one of the most hyped and highly anticipated contests of the year. Dave, myself, Chris Aceto will be there. We're going to arrive. Dave and I are going to arrive there on Friday. Chris is already there, but we are going to have wall-to-wall coverage. Obviously, we're going to have our own preview segments live from Pittsburgh. We're going to try to grab interviews with some of the top competitors in the open, in the classic physique. This is going to be a truly, truly epic show. And then, of course, prejudging men's open, classic physique, men's physique. They're going to have the men's segments, the men's competitions on Saturday, female competitions on Sunday. Obviously, we're going to be there for all the men's divisions, and we're going to have live coverage on our YouTube channel and, of course, on our Instagram. So if you're not following us on Instagram, official_RxMuscle. We're going to go right into the questions. The first two questions on the show from the Dave Palumbo Experience app. First question: I'm currently on contest prep using Test Probe, Masteron, Tren A, winstrol, turinabol, clen, T3, nolvadex, not using MK677 or HGH. Lately, I'm experiencing a lot of water retention, especially around my ankles. I'm also using 150 mg potassium per day. Any reason why this is happening, and what would you recommend to fix it?
Right off the bat, so it's a pretty nice, it's a pretty long list of drugs he's on, which could certainly be the cause of the fluid retention. I also don't know how many grams of carbs he's eating a day. Orals especially, I heard the turinabol mentioned in that list. I would probably get rid of the turinabol. I mean, you're on so many other drugs. There's no reason to be on that litany of that many substances. Get rid of the orals. The orals tend to hold water a lot in the ankles. Also, a lot of guys are on their feet all day. They stand for their job, or they're just, they're on their feet more so than, the average person who might sit at a computer desk. And then some guys are sitting at a desk and not moving all day. And a lot of times the water will pool in your ankles. Usually when you're on a low-carb diet, you don't really hold much water. But, if you're eating some carbs and you're taking drugs that cause fluid retention, like, he says he's not taking GH, but definitely orals can cause fluid retention. I would get rid of the turinabol, see how that works. I wouldn't start banging too much potassium, because you're going to throw your potassium levels off, and that can be dangerous. So I think he said he was on a blood pressure med too, right? Did he say he was on lisinopril or something like that?
No.
Okay.
No, he didn't. Okay. No, he didn't mention that.
I would like,
potassium. You mentioned potassium.
Okay, yeah, but I'd love to see what his blood pressure is too, because if it's a little high, sometimes that can cause a little bit of fluid to leave the blood vessels in the lower extremities and cause some fluid retention. So there's a lot of different reasons. Get off the orals, number one, and try to move. If you're on your feet a lot, try to sleep with your legs up. You might even want to wear, if you're on your feet a lot, I tell people this all the time. They look weird, but they work. Compression socks. You can get them in like CVS. Get the black ones. You don't need the white ones that look like you're an orthopedic patient. The black ones are kind of cool. You can wear them right up to your knees, and I'm telling you, you'll have no fluid in your legs. I usually consider, or when I tell people to try them, I tell them to take them off at night, because if you're sleeping at night, you really shouldn't need them. unless your ankles are huge when you go to bed at night. I have a feeling it's just a little bit uncomfortable. And like I said, I've seen this before in some competitors. Also, you might want to check, get some blood work done and check your creatinine levels, make sure your kidney function is good. But more than likely, it's from the orals and probably being on your feet too long and or sitting too long during the day and not moving around.
Second question, again, these first two questions from the Dave Palumbo Experience app. This question is about increasing metabolism diet-wise. As a natural athlete, says he wants to build muscle and get in good cardio shape, mentions Tabata cardio specifically. So I guess the question is increasing metabolism as a natural athlete in terms of a diet perspective.
I heard the word the Tabata cardio. That I think it's horrendous. It's like I have a friend of mine who does it. It's like you do like 40 seconds of like or 30 seconds of like high intensity cardio, and then you do like you rest for like 20 seconds, and you do 40, and you do like different like bouts of this stuff. For a bodybuilder, it's the worst thing you can do. You're not going to increase your metabolism doing this. You're going to just lose muscle, and you're probably going to just be miserable. Just do steady state cardio, okay? When you do steady state cardio and your heart rate is not too high, you're burning exclusively body fat, stored body fat. When your heart rate gets a little too high, you dip into carbohydrate metabolism because your body can't generate ATP, which is the fuel the body uses, the muscles use, can't generate ATP quick enough from fats, so your body has to switch to using carbs. We're not trying to burn carbs. You're trying to lose body fat, right? So high intensity cardio, even in spurts like the Tabata cardio does, is not gonna solve your problem. It's gonna make it worse. As a physique athlete, we're not really trying to get in cardiovascular shape. We're trying to look good. That's the main thing that you got to really focus on. Obviously, spiking your metabolism every once in a while, if you get a little stagnant, will help. If you're on low carbs once a week, throw a high carb day in there or throw a cheat meal in there. So that there's different, it's hard for me to give you a definitive answer because I don't know all the variables of what you're doing, but there's no secret cardio that's going to help. Ooh, I shocked my metabolism doing this Tabata cardio or doing this, CrossFit. More than likely you'll get hurt, you get injured. And that's what we don't want. Don't start doing kooky, crazy stuff. These two questions are really good. I get a lot of really good questions, Sid, on the Dave Palumbo Experience app. And for those of you who are first-time viewers of the show, it's an app you can download from the iTunes store or the Android store. It's $29 a month. You get me as your coach in your back pocket. You get access to all my writings, all the videos I've done in an organized fashion. I answer everyone's questions in an open forum. So you see everyone's questions and everyone's answers. It's a tremendous learning experience. I used to love reading Muscle Media 2000 back in the day because Bill Phillips would have a section where he would do a Q&A, Dan Duchesne would do a Q&A, and you learn so much because a lot of times you don't even know what questions you don't know the answers to. And then you see someone else ask the question and you read the answer and you're like, wow, I just learned a lot of information. And that's what goes on the app. And then I do a Q&A video, just like Ask Dave here. It's an extra one every single week for the app members. So for $29, you get a lot of content. You get a workout every week. You got access to all my cycles, on season, off season, pre-contest, beginners, advanced, women, men, detoxification protocols. Everything's in the app. It's a great resource. It's like a library for true, real information that's accurate. And it's constantly evolving and growing every single week as we add more content to it. So I want to thank you guys because I have a lot of people that subscribe to it and a lot of, loyal customers that have been on there for years with me. But I think once you try it out, you're going to see, holy mackerel, for $29 a month, you can't beat this. And a lot of people can't afford coaching. And this is a great way to have access to me, right there in your phone. So thank you.
Before we go to the rest of the questions, our friends at Titan Medical, Dave, have a sale this week, 10% off all weight loss therapies. And that includes, which we discussed last week, retatrutide, as well as Slu PP332.
Yeah. Our good friends over at Titan, of which Charisse is one of the owners. Her and John own the company, and I love them. And she's going through some medical issues right now. So I want to send out my prayers and everything to her. I know she's going to come out of it great. We love you. We only wish you a quick and speedy recovery, but they're offering, yes, a nice little discount on some of their therapies over there, especially the GLP-1 agonist therapies, which I know a lot of people are looking to get into. And you know what the problem with these GLP-1s is? People are going to their doctors to try to get prescriptions for them, and they're just not available. They're they're so overprescribed that they don't have inventory of the stuff. And the stuff is expensive. So if you want to get a nice deal on them where you're going to pay a reasonable price and have access to actually inventory that exists, head over to titanmedicalcenter.com, contact them, tell them Dave Palumbo, RxMuscle sent you. They'll give you a nice discount and you can get right on these therapies. You know, there's so many of them. There's the Ozempic, there's Mounjaro, and the new one that we talked about last week was just the triple therapy.
Yep.
Yeah. So, I mean, it makes the whole process very easy. And I have a lot of clients that I work with who have had just problems with cheating on their diet. They have a busy schedule. They're always hungry. And you know what? These therapies really help them stick to their diet. They're still eating their 5 meals a day, but they're not cheating anymore and they're getting great results. So here's an ability to have access to these therapies at a reasonable price, and they're actually in inventory. So give them a shot. Give them a shout out.
So again, 10% off all weight loss therapies, titanmedicalcenter.com. Mention Dave Palumbo, RxMuscle, and they will hook you up. Let's go to the rest of the questions from our Instagram page, Facebook, YouTube community page, all of our various social media outlets. Question that you tease at the top of this show: the longest you've seen someone who ran testosterone indefinitely? I've heard stories of guys running 400 to 500 mgs for 20 plus years without a break. I wanted to know your opinion on that.
Yeah, you know, I mean, obviously we consider 200 milligrams per week replacement therapy. When you're on like 400 milligrams, 500 milligrams, that's really kind of like a low grade cycle, even though you're not really cycling it because you're staying on it. For most people, they don't have any side effects from it. So, you know, testosterone, long-acting testosterone is not toxic to the liver or anything like that. It could raise your blood pressure, which you have to be. That's one of the variables you have to watch out for. You have to watch out that your red blood cell count doesn't get too high and your blood doesn't get too thick. So you might have to donate blood on a regular basis. You want to make sure your blood pressure doesn't go up. If you're checking all those variables and they're all normal, there's really no negative to it. I don't think that you really need to be on that much all the time. I would rather see you do 200 milligrams a week if that's your replacement dose. And then if you want to, like, you know, maybe every, 8 weeks, bump it up for 8 weeks, to 400 milligrams. But for a lot of guys, they can do a higher amount and they just don't have that negative side effect. It's when the dosages start getting really high. I mean, I'll just throw it out there. I just thought about this when Sid and I were talking about this off camera. He said, what was the most, milligrams you ever saw like a guy use per week? Because you hear these crazy numbers, like the pros use 5,000 milligrams a week of testosterone, which I think is insane. When I would go to 1,200 milligrams of real testosterone, that is, I would feel terrible. So usually I kept mine at 1,000. But there are guys for sure that are using 5,000 milligrams. I knew a guy who actually used 20,000 milligrams of testosterone a week. That's right. I'm not 2,000, 20,000 milligrams a week. He was a very good friend of mine too. And I told him, I said, "You're crazy. You're going to die." He did it for like 2 months. He would sweat just walking from his car into a restaurant. I thought he was going to die. His blood, God knows what his blood pressure must have been on that stuff. The sweat that would come off of him was scary. Like he had to actually carry a towel around with him and pat himself off. And he said, and I said, "How do you feel?" He goes, "I feel pretty terrible." He goes, "I'm strong in the gym." I said, "Yeah, but," I said, "Why would you want to feel terrible?" He must have had that steroid flu from that many milligrams a week. It was just, I said, "Where are you putting it all?" He's like, "Everywhere." And he didn't look that good. You would think, oh, he's huge. He wasn't even that huge. I think he was just, I know he was over-toxifying his body. But there are people that do crazy stuff like that. And you know what? When he came off, finally, he listened to me and he came off of it. And I made him go for blood work 4 weeks after that. And you know what? He had no side effect. There was nothing wrong with his body whatsoever. He had nothing, abnormal. His heart was good. His echocardiogram checked out. Blood pressure went back to normal. And it just goes to show you testosterone really is not toxic to the body. It's just not good to be on excessive amounts of it because you do get side effects while you're on it. But it was all reversible because it's not really a toxic compound. Now, if you had taken 25 anadrol a day, for 2 months, your liver would probably be in some pretty bad shapes. But because testosterone is not liver toxic in that sense, it didn't seem to have any permanent effects on them. But don't go try that experiment. It's just one of the crazy things that I've witnessed in my life in bodybuilding.
Question about training chest in particular: how to target more chest on pushing exercises while minimizing the front delts taking over the movement.
You know, I struggled with this when I first started, because when you go to the gym and you start bench pressing, you know, everyone wants to see how much they can bench press, right? And that's just a normal thing, right? Because you see guys in the gym do inclining, you know, or bench pressing 405, and that seems to be like the magic number. If you can bench 405, you get what's called street cred in the gym. You know, I remember back in the day, everyone was saying we should make shirts that say, you know, 400-pound, you know, bench press club, or, you know, then there was guys that wanted to do the 500-pound bench press club, 600-pound, and then, you know, same thing with squats, you know, the 600-pound squat club. So there's a certain level of acceptance you get from your peers if you can do that. The problem is that people wind up cheating. They'll do anything that they can to get the weight up. And the way you cheat on the bench press is you roll your shoulders forward. And when you roll your shoulders forward to push the weight up, you're using your front delts. So what it does is it fosters bad habits. So every time the weight gets too heavy and you're benching, you roll those shoulders forward. And then before you know it, you're really not lifting more weight as your weight goes up in the bench. Your shoulders are doing the weight, and you train your chest wrong. Now, if you prevent yourself from cheating and you keep those shoulders back and keep those pecs up, when you bench and you stop, when you can't no longer do the reps with good form, in other words, right before you start cheating, what you'll do is you'll train your body to only use your pec muscles to move the weight. And then once they start getting developed, because now you're really just only focusing on the pecs and you're not allowing yourself to use your front delts, your chest will start getting stronger and bigger. And then all of a sudden you'll be like, oh, this is easy. And you'll realize that the pec muscle is a much bigger muscle than the front delts and much more powerful. And that's why you can start going up in weights and lifting weights, but you have to kind of retrain yourself to the bench press the proper way. I see it all the time, guys in the gym. I tell them, I said, you're using your front delts, you know, and sometimes they ask, you know, what they should do to fix it. And sometimes they're like, oh, that's how I bench. I'm like, all right, good. That's why you have no chest. So form is very important. It's the same thing with squats and the same thing with back movements. If you cheat just to get the weight up, you're really not working the muscles that you're looking to work. You're just ego lifting to try to say, hey, I can do this much weight. But no one really cares how much weight you have. They're more impressed by how you look, especially in bodybuilding. So hopefully that helps.
Question about clen and dosage. Any difference in taking only doses of clen if I increase it by 20 mcg at the time, sorry, till I reach 80 mcg? It will make any difference in results if I split it following your protocol? I can perfectly manage the 80 mcg without any side effects. I'm 7 weeks out.
You want to always space out the dosage of clenbuterol. So you take 20 and you do 20 every couple of hours. You don't take it all at once. First of all, you're not going to have it. You want it working all day as a fat burner. You don't want to take it and then have it work in the morning and then by afternoon it's not doing anything anymore because it's run its course. The second reason you won't do that is because when you take clenbuterol in higher amounts, what it does is it drops your blood pressure, okay, because it opens up the vessels. When it drops blood pressure, okay, and the more you take in one dose, the more it will drop your blood pressure. Your heart then has to beat faster to kind of keep the pressure going because your blood pressure can actually get too low. And if it gets too low, your heart beats faster to maintain pressure. So now you're getting rapid heart rate. You think it's happening from the clenbuterol. It's not happening directly from the clenbuterol. It's happening indirectly from the clenbuterol because you're forcing your body to beat, you're forcing your heart to beat faster because your blood pressure dropped. If you space out the dosage of 80 micrograms per day and do 20, 20, 20, 20, now you're never really dropping blood pressure significantly at each dose. And by the time the next dose kicks in, the other dose is kind of running its course already. So you're getting even fat burning throughout the day, and you're not dropping blood pressure enough to actually raise heart rate. And that's the key. I see people, they're on 120 micrograms of clenbuterol per day. They're taking 60 in the morning and 60 at night, and it's just, and they feel terrible all day. And their blood pressure's up and down, and their heart rate's beating out of their chest. And they're like, I can't take this stuff. It affects my heart too much. I'm like, clenbuterol doesn't have an effect on the heart. It doesn't have any beta-1 receptor activation. The heart doesn't have beta-2 receptors. It has beta-1 receptors. Ephedra stimulates beta-1 receptors because it's a generalized beta agonist, meaning it stimulates beta-1 and beta-2 receptors. Clenbuterol is only beta-2 receptor stimulation. It doesn't have any beta-1 receptor stimulation, so it doesn't make the heart directly go faster. If your heart is beating faster, it's because your blood pressure dropped too much and your heart has to try to keep up. So don't take your clenbuterol all in one dose.
take a question about cardio, and I guess training in terms of what will help your legs or take away from your legs. Do you think all your years of long, slow distance oxidative training is what made your body, particularly legs, extremely vascular and unable to store fat? My last couple of contest preps, I did 3 to 4 hours of cardio a day, and since then, my legs have been the most vascular they've ever been. Even in the off season, they cannot gain fat. Now, all I got to do is 30 minutes a day, and they look the same.
Well, once you build that vasculature in your body, it's never going away. I mean, I still have it already. I have veins everywhere. I have my arms, my legs. But I was very vascular in high school before I even did anything excessively, athletically. So I think a lot of the vascularity is genetic. In other words, how superficial your veins are, how many veins you have. My father had a lot of veins in his arms. I remember I didn't really notice too many on his legs, only because he wasn't that lean. But his arms were always very vascular. So I'm sure I take after him in that regard. And they were thin, obviously. But as I was bodybuilding and I got bigger, muscularly speaking, the veins grew in size, which made them more impressive looking, obviously. I do think that running, the long distance running, increased blood flow to my legs and probably created a lot of neovascularization, meaning new offshoots of the veins and arteries to provide blood at a much greater rate. Now, so maybe I have more veins because of that, but I don't think the level of vascularity I have is necessarily due to that. Now, it's funny because I've had cardiac catheterizations where they go through your groin and they go up into your heart, to visualize stuff. And the doctor, and I probably told the story before, the doctor told me that he actually gets lost in my veins because, usually people have a set amount of veins that they can, and they know exactly how to get up to the heart through the groin. I have so much new vessels grown in there, and I'm probably a lot of bodybuilders have that he actually gets lost in my blood vessels because he doesn't. They all look different, and because think about it, and mine are much bigger in size. So normally you say, all right, the big ones are where you have to go. That's the route to the top. You almost need a GPS to get through my veins in my body. So he was laughing. He's like, yeah, it took me a while to get to your heart. He goes, I kept going down the wrong pathway like a rat in a maze. So, but yeah, so there's definitely a level of new blood vessel formation when you not only just run and do a lot of aerobic activity, but even just squatting. Think about what the oxygen debt the muscles are in when you're squatting 600 pounds. The body's saying, give us more blood supply, make it more efficient. So the body grows more blood vessels in there. Great story. Rich Gaspari told me, he got a cardiac CT scan and they said he had a complete blockage of one of his coronary arteries, but he never had a heart attack and died from it because his body actually developed, collateral circulation around it. Like in other words, from bodybuilding, his body knew, all right, we got to grow a better blood supply to the heart because he needs to pump this blood to the body. And it actually saved his life, probably, which is crazy. But, putting your body in oxygen debt and training on a regular basis definitely helps with the delivering blood to the muscles more efficiently than the average couch potato.
It's a question about testolyze, and, we have a lot of people that have questions regarding testolyze dosing, testolyze protocols, and I guess sometimes comparisons to PCT as we have.
Yes.
Or can it replace a quote unquote traditional PCT if I'm coming off 6 to 8 weeks just to clean out? Also, do you think bumping up calories to slightly above maintenance? All right, I think this is totally, that's a totally different question. Right. Let's stick to the original question. Testolyze replace a traditional PCT if coming off 6 to 8 weeks just to clean out?
Okay. Yeah, if you're very suppressed, what I like to do is I like to turn the testicles directly back on right after that cycle's over. So HCG does that better than anything. So HCG mimics the pituitary hormone, luteinizing hormone. And what it does is it directly tells the testicles produce testosterone. Now, that doesn't make the testicles stay on, but it makes them start producing testosterone. Now, when you stop the HCG in 2 weeks after you start it, you're only going to do five shots of it for 2 weeks. Over 2 weeks, it'll stop again, okay? But the initial turn on is there. So now you got the testicles doing something. Now what we want to do is turn on the pituitary and the hypothalamus, and that's why we do the, either like nolvadex or Clomid because that blocks estrogen receptors in the hypothalamus, which then turns on those other hormones, the gonadotropic releasing hormone and then luteinizing hormone, and now your body is working again. So it's like it's a two-step stage. First turn on the testicles, then get the pituitary and the hypothalamus working. Testolyze is great because it optimizes your natural production by, number one, reducing estrogen a little bit. So it flushes extra estrogen out of the body. Less estrogen, less pituitary and hypothalamic shutdown. It also reduces DHT production. So a lot of your testosterone can convert to dihydrotestosterone, which is not what we want, especially when we're off cycle. We want to make sure that the testosterone that the body is producing stays as testosterone. So Testolyze does both of those things: reduces estrogen, decreases the production of what did I just do here? Sorry, reduces the production of DHT. It also directly stimulates testosterone production in the body. So it's a good adjunct. So if you're on a heavy cycle, I like to start with HCG for 2 weeks. I like to do 2 weeks of nolvadex or Clomid, and then during this whole time period, stay on Testolyze, and then continue Testolyze in the off period so that your estrogen is kept low and your DHT is kept low and your testosterone is maximized. Now, the question is, can you just do the Testolyze and not do the other stuff? Yeah, you could. If you have no access to the other stuff, you can. It won't be as effective, okay? And it might take a little longer to turn your body back on because you're not going to, it's not like a shotgun approach you would do if you take the HCG, but it will work. But you have to be a little more patient. So a lot of people combine the two. But if you have nothing else and you can't access HCG or Nolvadex Clomid, then by all means, I would recommend taking 3 pills twice a day of the Testolyze. It'll also prevent you from having any kind of hair loss or acne and stuff like that because it keeps DHT levels really low. And that's why I give it to teenagers a lot of times. A lot of girls, and 13, 14, 15 years old, I give it to boys in the same age range. It really stops the acne because in kids that are that young, they have a surge in DHT production. And kids that are vulnerable to that, I was one of those kids, you break out a lot. Some kids, they don't produce a lot of DHT, or they're just not sensitive to it, and they don't get acne. I know bodybuilders that were on tons of gear and they never broke out. That didn't produce one pimple their whole life. It's just genetics. But yes, you can use it. Will it be as effective? No. When it's combined with HCG and or Nolvadex Clomid, it works the best. But yeah, I would keep it in there for sure, especially while you're off.
We get a lot of questions about whether we would interview someone, and I'm not sure if maybe over the last 10, 11 years we've been doing this, if you've ever had him on. Bill Phillips, have you ever attempted or thought of having Bill Phillips on the show for an interview? The man was a legend back in the 90s with the EAS supplements and the Muscle Media Bodybuilding magazine. Also, the Steroid book that he had seems like it would be a very interesting interview.
Yeah, that's probably one of my interviews that I would love to get that I have never gotten. There's a small list of people. It's like Arnold, Bill Phillips, definitely 2 of those people. I had Sean Phillips, his brother, on, and Sean was, his right-hand man at EAS when they ran that, and Muscle Media 2000 when they ran the magazine and the supplement company. So I got a lot of the good information. We should probably pull that interview and replay it because probably a lot of people haven't seen it. It's probably been over 10 years that I did that interview, and Sean was great. Maybe even get him back on. Sean is really good on camera. Bill is kind of hard to nail down. I don't know what the problem is. It's really, really hard. I know he had a really bad time with COVID. He was on a ventilator. He almost died. I mean, he looked like he was on his deathbed when they pulled him off that ventilator. And he, luckily, thank God, he recovered and he looks like he's doing fine. But he's very secretive. You don't really see him very much. I have reached out to him in the past. Maybe I should try to reach out again. I'd love to get him on because the guy is, probably a wealth of knowledge. And I was like a religious disciple of his. I read every word he wrote, from his anabolic reference guide updates to the anabolic reference guide book that he did. I probably know the book better than he does. I've read it so many times. And that was before I ever took a single steroid. I read that book that many times. And the Muscle Media 2000, magazine was kind of like an extension of that on a regular basis. And he had so much great drug information in there and just real good information. There was no inaccurate stuff in there, which is what I really liked. And remember guys, this was before the internet. So there was no access to any information. So this was like my source of a lot of stuff in addition to what I was doing on my own and figuring out. But yeah, I think it would be a tremendous interview. I would, if anyone has any good context for Bill, I'd love to reach out to me and let me know.
Take one more question. This is a question you have been asked before, but it was years ago, and it's about your children and whether you would ever encourage them into going into bodybuilding. So I think there's a difference between encouraging them, meaning guiding them to bodybuilding,
Yeah.
or also if they were to come up to you, hey, daddy, Logan wants to get into bodybuilding. What would you tell them and why?
Yeah, I don't think I would actually encourage, like, I'm not going to, like, I wouldn't say I want you to be a bodybuilder. I'm not, that's because I don't, look, my father never told me what to do. And I really admire that about him, because it probably, every parent has an idea of what they think their kids would be good at and would want to tell and direct them into doing. And he never did that. Even when I told him I was leaving medical school my third year, he didn't say bad idea. He said, okay, that's just, you have to make your own decisions in life. So I really respected that about him. So yeah, I would never tell my kids what to do. I might make recommendations to them. And if they say yes, then great. If they say no, then great. It seems like being a parent, as long as I have, it seems like the best strategy is to let your kids come to you and say, I'm interested in this. What do you think? Because if they're the ones who come up with the idea and then you guide them, I think that's a better way to be. So if like I know Chris Aceto, I don't think he pushed his kids towards bodybuilding, but his Fareed, his one son, just took a liking to it and started doing it and got into it. And then Chris obviously is not going to like turn his back on him and say, don't do it, like, Sergio's dad did. So then Chris became, his coach essentially. And so I think I would do the same thing. If my daughter or my son said, hey, I want to compete and can you help me, with my diet and of course I'm going to help them. That's what I do for a living, but I'm not going to force them and try to, because if I say to them, you should really go into bodybuilding, then they'll absolutely do the opposite whatever I tell them. That's the way my kids are, at least. So do I really want them to go into bodybuilding? I'd like to see that. I think they can do other stuff. But if that was their passion and they loved it and they really, it caught like Chris's son Fareed, I would absolutely make sure that they did things the right way. I think they would have an advantage. They call, they say like the stars in Hollywood, their kids are Nepo babies. Like they have access to, getting into movies much more easily. I would imagine that, if like Chris, if his son, my son, or my daughter want to get into the industry, I have a little bit of an extra, in than they do, because I've been doing this for so long. So obviously it helps when you have a parent at home that knows, everything there is about a certain subject, but it has to be my kid's idea. So I wouldn't discourage them if they said that was what they were interested in, but I necessarily wouldn't try to, push them into that industry either.
And that's going to do for this episode of Ask Dave. Reminder, if you haven't already done so, subscribe below, hit the notification bell. We're going to have loads of content from this weekend's Pittsburgh Pro. And of course, now as we progress into the thick of the contest season, and of course, everything else that we have on this channel, Heavy Muscle Radio, After Hours, this show, Ask Dave, the Dave Palumbo podcast, and all the other little segments, Dave's rants that we have on this channel. Subscribe, hit the notification bell. You're not going to miss any of that or more that we have on this channel. Again, we're going to load up a lot of content on our Instagram as well during the live portion of the contest. So if you're not already following us on Instagram, it's official_RxMuscle. For Dave Palumbo, I'm Sadiq Faruqi. We'll see you next time.